Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to take these things off your car. Yes, this is the existing rotor that was on my car. And essentially today, I'm going to show you guys how to change the rotors and pads on a 2015 plus Subaru WRX. I'm going to go over everything you need to know about changing your brake pads and or rotors. I will show you guys how to do both essentially, just in case you only need to change your pads. And we are going to be doing some FactionFab performance rotors and pads on my 2016 WRX. And this is basically applicable to all the 2015 plus WRXs, assuming you don't have the Brembo brakes. But even if you have the upgraded brakes, most of the knowledge is applicable and the systems are very similar. So definitely check the video out if you're interested. Again, guys, this is a great way to save money. You don't need to pay someone to do this. This is something you can do at home with minimal tools. I promise it's easier than you would think. And before we get into the video, if you want to see more awesome WRX content, be sure to subscribe to the channel, or at least consider subscribing, because we've got lots of mods coming, lots of cool stuff with this car. Going stage 3, we're going to make more power with this car essentially. Stage 3 isn't really a thing once you're pro-tuned, but get straight into this instructional video. The first step is breaking loose your lug nuts while the car is still on the ground. All right, so we've got the wheel off. We're basically ready to start here, and I just wanted to note a few things that you should have. First off, you can see that I'm wearing protective gloves. Highly recommend them. The second thing, you're going to want a paper bag. I've used this for other brake jobs, and you're going to want to just put that under because we are going to use some PB Blaster or WD-40. I also have a cinder block here. The line for the caliper, so the actual brake lines on this car aren't super long compared to other cars, so I like to have a cinder block to rest the brake caliper on, and I don't use a bungee just because you can collapse the interior of the brake line. One other thing before you get started with these things, you always want to inspect the surrounding area so you can look at different aspects of your suspension to see if they're rusted out and need to be replaced. We're actually looking pretty good. There is some surface rust, as you guys can see, but I am in New England, so this is to be expected. And we're going to be putting on some aftermarket coilovers just shortly into the summer. One thing I'm actually just seeing that I didn't see just before is I've got my hub-centric ring for my aftermarket tires. So make sure if you have this, take it off. And let's get straight into this. So if you just need to replace your pads, you don't have to take off the bracket and the caliper. You can just take off the caliper and not the mounting bracket. And to do that, you can actually, there's a screw right here, and you can actually just do the screw underneath and lift it up and change your brake pads. But because we're doing the brakes and the rotors, which I highly recommend doing if you're doing the pads anyways, because you may as well get some good rotors. It's pretty easy. It's just 4 bolts instead of 1 bolt. But again, if you're just doing pads, you're just going to take, instead of this top one, it's hard to see because of the caliper, there's one right under there, and it's going to lift the caliper up, and you're going to be able to replace the pads and then put the caliper back on. It's super easy to do. But again, if you are replacing your rotors too, and I'll make a video about when you should replace your rotors and how to tell if you need to replace your rotors, so don't worry, wait for that video. But ultimately, it's either age, or if you have a lip here, or if you see it shaved down. But really, what made me do it is there is a lip on my rotors right now. It's pretty significant. It's enough to be a little bit significant, so I thought I'm already going down here, so I might as well replace it. But we won't wait too much longer. Let's get straight into this. So we're going to start, before we even start doing any bolts, we're just going to hit this with some either PB Blaster or WD-40. I just happen to have WD-40 with me. So I'm just going to hit this just so it doesn't get stuck later on. All you need is a little bit. You just want to start penetrating that now before you do any of the bolts. And I like to hit a few of the bolts in the back that I know that we're going to take off. And I have one of these nozzles that you can angle like that. So I just hit a few of these bolts. We're going to remove the caliper and the bracket, the mounting bracket, separately. Some people remove it all as one and then can replace it. I'm just going to remove it separately just to make this easy and to show you guys exactly what needs to get done. So it's 4 bolts. It's one right here, and then a reciprocating bolt right down there. Hopefully you can see that right there. And then we've got our mounting bolt that's right here for the mounting bracket, and this reciprocating one that's right down there. So we've taken off the caliper. That was super easy. You just have to kind of wiggle it off, and now we're left with the mounting bracket and the pads themselves. This one and the one below it are 14 millimeters. These are holding the caliper itself, and then the bolts holding the mounting bracket right here are actually 17 millimeters. I apologize for the confusion. The mounting bracket bolts were the most difficult bolts to get off that I've probably ever encountered working on cars, to be honest, except those that have to get sawed off. But so we had very little pad left. I will show you guys these later. Let's get the caliper off first, and then we'll look at the pads and the mounting bracket. There we have it. Rotor is off. It took a lot of banging to get that thing loose, and let's get the new one on. Before I get the new one on, I'm just going to clean up the hub, and then the new one will slip right back on. Before we get the new one on, we do need to clean it, so let's go and clean that before we get this on, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I'm just going to use some brake clean here, run-of-the-mill stuff from AutoZone or whatever your parts store is. I'm going to spray down the rotor, and what I'm looking to do here is remove the oil that they applied during the manufacturing process. You can see it kind of that black substance. I'm going to wipe it down with the brake clean, and again, we're just trying to remove the oily substance that is on these rotors. For when you get them new, when you open a rotor out of the bag, you're going to feel it. It's very noticeable. You don't want that gumming up your pad as you break these things in and bed your brakes. Alright, so this is the mounting bracket with our brake pads, and this was pretty difficult to get off. But what's important here is you understand the pad pattern, or just basically where on which side is the indicator, and that's essentially it. So we know that the indicator is on the inside, and you always want to have your indicator on the inside, like you can see here, where the pistons are actually pushing up against, because that's what's going to wear the most and the fastest, because that's the brake pad that's actually getting pushed into the rotor itself. If your mounting bracket looks really bad, you can clean it up with some brake clean and some wire brushes. And the same goes with your mounting hardware. If it doesn't look great, most brake pad kits come with mounting hardware, so you can replace it, but you don't always have to do it if they look like they're in good shape. So we're going to go ahead and pop these brake pads out and then put the new brake pads in, but we're going to save this brake pad, the one where the pistons were in, so we can push the pistons back in when we need to get this thing reinstalled. So let's get these brake pads out. To get our new brake pads back on, I'm just going to put a little bit of lube on here. This is just brake lube. Okay, so we got the brake pads in. They are flush. They might need to be adjusted later, but they are in with a little bit of manhandling. And in this case, we did reuse the old mounting hardware because it was in great condition. Yeah, the last thing to do now is to walk back our pistons, and then we will be able to get this all in, basically. And yeah, it's pretty simple. So let's get it all back installed. Okay, we need to back down the pistons on the brake caliper. So what I'm doing is I'm using the existing brake pad. I've got it in there and a C-clamp. I'm alternating sides and slowly tightening it until the pistons are all the way back. The last step to putting back together the front brakes is torquing down the bolts that hold the caliper to the knuckle and hold the caliper in. So the bolts that hold the caliper in are going to be torqued to 20 pound-feet, and the 17mm bolts that hold the caliper to the knuckle, and apologize, you guys can't see right here, it's because they are 59 pound-feet of torque, so it is very hard to torque these things down in such a small space. I've actually got to say, this is one of the more difficult parts of doing this, is actually putting it back together, because you know, I'm a pretty big guy, and there's not a lot of room inside the wheel well itself for my torque wrench that goes up to 60 pound-feet, and 60 pound-feet is not an easy torque to meet while you're sitting, and you don't have any room to pull. You're basically kind of pushing straight at it. I've already broken the lug nuts, jacked up the car, and now the only thing here to do is to unscrew the lug nuts and take the wheel off. To the rear brakes and rotors, these are slightly different. Some people say they're harder, some people say they're a little bit easier. They're just different. So taking the brake pads off, it's going to be the same, and we will run through how to do that again. The only thing that's different here is we have the parking brake. So the first step is to make sure that you don't have the parking brake engaged, and the parking brake is actually within the rotor. It's like a drum style parking brake. Once we remove our hub centric ring, you'll see two little holes that you can kind of see here, and you can actually use a bolt to drill into those, and it's going to push this assembly out. Or the other option is to take our rubber grommet off, which we're going to have to take off eventually, and replace into the new, and put it into the new rotor. But you can take the rubber grommet off and actually back down with a little lever. You can back down the parking brake, and that's actually how you loosen and tighten your parking brake. But I'm not going to do that unless I really have to. I'm going to use the screw method. You're actually going to use the screw that holds in the bracket for your brake line. I think you guys can see it right there. There's a 10mm bolt right there. that holds in your brake line. Like on the front brake, before I even start this process, I'm going to take some WD-40 and I'm going to hit all the bolts that really need WD-40 so I can start penetrating here. I'm going to get my hub-centric ring off here and I'm going to expose those two holes. 14mm bolts. Shouldn't be too hard to loosen the ones that hold the caliper in. They're only at 20 pound-feet of torque. We're going to take the caliper off. Bolts are looking pretty clean. And it's off. And then on the back, we've got actually really nice space here. Just let our caliper sit. It's another 14 mil. These are going to be much harder to break loose. These are at 49 pound-feet of torque. And it's a 12mm bolt. Thought it was a 10mm. It's a 12mm. I brought it out a little bit on the right side, and now I'm going to hit it a little bit on the left side. And I think there we go. Rotor will slide right off here. So you can see here there's this little grommet, and we're going to transfer this to the next rotor. I'm going to push that through. Went through okay. And then the rotor's done. Make sure you keep that little grommet because you want to save this because you're going to need that. It protects the integrity of the parking brake. You can see the assembly of the parking brake. It's all in the interior, so it grasps out, and it's never really well, it's kind of constantly touching, but it's also never really like rubbing too much when you have your parking brake disengaged, and that's why that's why these things last literally forever. That's why we don't have to replace them like brake pads. But if you were to have gotten that little grommet out, there's a little level here that you can use a flathead and loosen or tighten this parking brake. So if you're pulling your parking brake all the way up to the top and it's feeling super loose, go in there and tighten that up, and vice versa if you want it looser and it's too tight or you're having problems getting your rotor off. But now, super easy, we're just going to clean up the hub here with a little bit of brake clean, and then we're going to put our new rotor on. Okay, so the next step is we need to take the actual piston and back it out. So I'm going to show you guys quickly how to do that. It's pretty easy. Apologize if this is a little bit hard to see, but we're just going to take the old brake pad that we had, and we're going to take our caliper, and we're just going to have the brake pad just backing it all the way back down. We're just going to put this all back together the way we took it off. It's pretty simple and pretty easy. Clip my pads in. Again, I'm just going to get these hand tight. These ones like to spin a little bit. So there's some play here because we backed out that piston so much. So just pump the brakes up when you get back into the car. Okay, so the bracket to knuckle is 49 pound-feet, and then the caliper to bracket is 20 pound-feet. So we're going to start with our 20 pound-feet, and I'm going to just set it on a torque wrench. I highly recommend getting a smaller torque wrench that does smaller measurements here. You usually want a torque wrench that'll go down to like 10 pound-feet, and it'll be a little bit more exact because you do not want to damage these. You don't even want to come close to damaging these. So that's what I actually did for this. I didn't have a smaller torque wrench, and I made this the opportunity to get one. And then we're going to set it to, it's supposed to be 49. I'm going to do 50, probably 51. All right, get this wheel back on, and then I will tell you guys the last few things that you need to do to complete this process of installing your brakes. And we're golden. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. There are still 2 things that you need to do before you're done with installing your brakes. You need to pump your brakes back up, and that's pretty easy. I'm gonna show you right now how to do that. Let's just take a look. Super dark, but that's my foot, that's the brake pedal, and I'm just gonna push a couple times until it gets kind of tight. So essentially, you just want to push on your brakes a couple times to make sure that you pump your brakes back up. Because we backed down the piston with that C-clamp to make sure we had room to slip the caliper back onto the rotor itself with the pads. We need to make sure we pump our brakes up so it closes, that piston comes back out and closes and creates a tight bond with the brake pads. And this is just going to ensure that the brake pads don't move or fall out even, but they don't move while you're backing the car out. And then the second step that you need to do after pumping up your brakes is you need to make sure that you bed your brakes in properly. And bedding your brakes is just creating an even and controlled material transfer between your brake pads and your rotors. It's something everyone needs to do. It's something that you guys need to do, and it's something that doesn't really happen when you take your car to a shop to get your brakes done. That's not done properly. And if you bed your brakes properly, not only are you going to get the best performance out of your brake pads and your braking system, but you're going to make sure that you don't have some uneven material transfer, which will make you feel like you kind of have a warped rotor or something, or you might feel like you've got an unbalanced wheel. It's also going to negatively affect the braking performance from your braking system. And if you're not careful and you take your car out for a nice rip and do a lot of braking on the first time, you might imprint the pads and get some material imprinting on your rotors, which is also bad. All those things, if you don't bed your brakes properly, are going to reduce the life of your pads and rotor. So I highly recommend bedding your brakes. And just to avoid making this video 30 minutes long, I'm going to make a video that will be released midweek here about how to bed your brakes properly on the 15 WRX, and just in general how to bed your brakes properly. So look out for that video in a couple days about, again, how to bed your brakes properly. It's something you need to do whether you take your car to a shop or you're doing your own brakes. If you guys stuck this far through the video, let me know in the comment section below. You guys are the part of the community that makes this channel thrive. I appreciate you guys for being here. We are going to be doing a 10,000 subscriber giveaway, so you know, a little bit of a forewarning if you guys are listening this far. Again, let me know in the comment section below if you stuck all the way to the end. Thank you guys for watching this video. I'm so excited for what's coming this summer with this car. I've got like 50 mods ready to go in the car. We're going to be making more power. I'm really doing it all with this car, so I'm super excited. I'm super excited to be filming it all. And guys, the WRX is going to be crazy on this channel this summer, so be sure you're subscribed, be sure you're watching out for some videos. Lots of fun stuff to come. Thank you guys for watching.